Hello, welcome or welcome back, depending on if you're new here. This is a painting I've been meaning to make for a while, and I am so glad I finally sat down to do it. When I go on trips, I often don't have time to stop and paint along the way, especially when I'm with other people. Instead, I like to take a lot of photos to use as references later, and often these references will pop up in the travel journal sketchbook spreads that I like to make when I come home from a trip. And if you're familiar at all with my content, you've probably seen a video or two about one of those. But I always end up with a ton of photos that I'm so inspired by and am itching to paint, and yet somehow I never seem to actually sit down and paint them. There's always something more urgent or something more timely to paint instead, or it just keeps getting kicked down the list until I never end up making time for them. This piece I'm painting today is based off of this photo from a trip to Madeira, Portugal from a few years ago. What pushed me to finally make time for this photo is Landscape Art Club. I was co-host for the weekly prompt recently using a few of my Madeira photos, which of course meant that I actually had to finally sit down and paint at least one of them. If you haven't heard of Landscape Art Club, it's a great group that puts out weekly and monthly photo prompts around a different theme or location. And if you want to participate, you paint or draw one of the prompts from that week or month and post it with the hashtag. So in the end, you get lots of different artists' perspectives on the same photo prompts, and it's really cool to see. I don't always have time to participate, but I like to whenever I can, and this was my first time being a co-host where my photos were the ones that everyone would be using as references that week. So it was a really great push to return to these incredible views that I loved so much when I was there. This particular view is from a hike called Pico do Oreiro to Pico Ruivo, and I probably totally butchered that name, so very sorry about that, but it's one of the most famous hikes on the island, and also probably one of the most fantastic hikes I have ever done in my life. It's fairly difficult because the trail involves walking up and down a lot of mountainous terrain, but it was so worth it. I cannot emphasize that enough. You're going up, down, and sometimes through the mountains with incredible panoramic views of the island, and it's actually kind of wild to be so high up looking out over the mountains and then right next to it you're like above the clouds staring at the ocean. It's an incredible range of views on such a small island because the mountains are like pretty high, but they're like right up against the ocean. So I cannot stress enough how beautiful the landscapes here are. This hike in particular, you're on these narrow walkways and stone stairs, and there's just a straight drop down on either side of you, or you're skirting along the edge of a cliff, and the paths are wide enough to not be worried about falling, but it just makes the views so much more incredible. And on top of that, this particular hike is great for sunrise. So you drive up these kind of scary, windy roads before the sun is up, and then you watch it rise from the starting point before heading off to go hike the whole actual trail. And you can get through most of it before it gets too hot. And this was my first sunrise hike, so I'd never been on one before. This day was just so incredible, and I know I sound like a broken record when I say that, but it's just true. This piece is definitely a study in layers. The shadows in the photo are really deep, and it was interesting for me to work out how I wanted to portray them and what kind of approach I wanted to go with, but I'm happy with how it's coming out, and I really enjoyed the process of it. This piece is in my Etcher Perfect sketchbook, which I'm almost done with, which is kind of exciting. And I know I've been using my Illo sketchbook a lot recently, but I've done all of my landscape art club pieces so far in this other sketchbook, so I felt like I needed to return to it for this. And there's only a few pages left, so it felt like this was the sketchbook for this piece. And yeah, so if you made it this far, thank you. I really appreciate you. If you've ever been to Madeira, let me know if you did any hiking and what your favorite hikes were, or if you haven't been to Madeira but you like to hike, let me know where your favorite hikes are. I always love to hear about amazing hikes. If you want to learn more about Landscape Art Club, I'll link them in the description below, along with my socials and a link to the supplies I was using today in case you want to check them out. If you enjoyed the video, please leave a like and consider subscribing if you want to see more from me. And here is the final piece. Thanks again for watching, and I will see you in the next one.